and welcome to you all who are on the call, all 15 of you. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are.
What's the geographic spread we have here? I guess Sushant is probably the furthest east.
We have Mamoon from the same region, I'm guessing.
Ah, okay, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You ready to roll?
I think so. All right. Well, welcome to you all who are joining us on this webinar to talk about the Friends of Research for Life funding proposal process. As you may note in the upper left corner, you'll see that we are recording this session. So we will post the recording afterward for those who weren't able to attend, or if you wish to go back and relive this time, we'll have that recording available for you. So my name is Daniel Dollar. I'm at Yale University, and I'll just introduce Andrew Powell, who's with the STM Association, and Mary Oakes, who is formerly at Cornell and now a volunteer, retired volunteer. Mary helped us with putting this presentation together, but and played a critical role, but is unable to join us this morning. So why don't we advance to next slide? So here's our agenda. We want to just walk through Friends for Research for Life. I know many of you have been in various presentations, but we felt it was still good to do an overview of the Friends organization, talk about the fundraising team or committee, and our role in this process. And I would say that Andrea, Mary, and myself, we're all members of the fundraising team. We'll discuss the funding proposal process. And then I'll be handing it off to Andrea, who will be talking about the project proposal documents themselves, provide us a fiscal overview, which I think will certainly help frame some of the work that's going on and just some of our financial status. We'll have some information on help. So if you need help and support in this funding proposal process, and spoiler alert, I will tell you that the fundraising team is and the full committee is here to help you with that, and then just have time for questions and answers. So Friends of Research for Life. So Research for Life, as we know, or as most of you know, is a public-private partnership composed of 5 programs: Hanari, Agora, Owari, Ardi, and Goli, providing institutions in lower and middle-income countries with online access to academic and professional peer-reviewed content. And we aim, to improve teaching, research, and policymaking in health, agriculture, the environment, and other life, physical, and social sciences. So Research for Life, though, is a voluntary association. It's not a legal entity. And as we now celebrate 20 years of existence, that was started with the founding of Hanari in 2001, and we've witnessed great success over the past 2 decades. We also have to acknowledge that as a voluntary partnership, we do operate on a minimal budget that's derived from the fees of middle-income countries that contribute fees for access to content and help that supports the program, and the extensive in-kind contributions from the partner organizations. And so we lack this legal structure. So we have the strength of our voluntary partnership, but there's also the challenges that brings. And fundraising is key to that challenge. But it's particularly difficult, again, because we don't have a legal entity for accepting donations. And so this makes it difficult to begin significant fundraising efforts. without that proper structure in place. And many potential donors will not donate without a tax-exempt legal structure to accept their donations. So at the 2020 Research for Life General Partners meeting, the partnership approved a proposal from the Fundraising Committee to establish a Friends of Research for Life as a US-based 50c3 charitable organization with its own independent governance structure and board of directors. And this is critical for its legal nonprofit status. With the mission of this organization being to raise and provide funding for Research for Life initiatives. And you can see some of the key events over the past year, but if we could advance to the next slide. This past year has been an effort to establish this organization and get it up and running. So it's been incorporated. It was incorporated in the state of Delaware, but then we applied for and have received from the US federal government, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, for those who don't know, a 501c3 status as a tax-exempt organization. We've established a board of directors. We have begun very initial fundraising efforts with an initial appeal that went out at the beginning of this year, end of last year, beginning of this year, and including the launch of the website that you see here. So the Friends have already funded 2 projects in particular. One is the content portal, which recently launched, and the second to develop a fundraising strategy that includes the hiring of a consultant who happens to be on this call, Sushanta Gupta, if you haven't met him yet. But we're still, I think it's very important to understand that we are still in the very early stages of getting the organization set up and beginning to think about fundraising and fundraising efforts. So if we move to the next slide. So that's the Friends for Research for Life. Now the fundraising committee or team, we are the group that facilitates and coordinates efforts to identify sources for funding and to raise funds to support the Research for Life. And it was from our team that the proposal was made for establishing a Friends of Research for Life organization. And we now serve as the liaison group to the Friends organization. And we also are a key coordinating group and consultants within the Research for Life partnership as you consider and think about funding proposals. And you'll see on the screen here the list of membership. I'm co-chair along with Michael Olam, and you see the other members, current members of the membership of the fundraising team. All right, next slide. So, so how do funds come from the Friends and go to Research for Life partners and projects? So, again, Friends of Research for Life is set up as a separate independent entity, and it needs to be this way for legal purposes and tax-exempt purposes. And so how does this process work? And also, again, Research for Life itself isn't a legal entity. So we have the Friends organization, and how does money move from Friends to Research for Life proper? So it needs to happen as part of an approved project proposal to receive funding. So funds move from Friends to various Research for Life initiatives and projects through a project proposal process that's vetted, reviewed, and approved by all the relevant parties. We have created a formal proposal process and documents to guide this effort, and we'll be talking about those in the coming slides. Projects can come from anywhere. So they can come from within inside the Research for Life partnership or outside the partnership. But particularly in these early stages of our development, we're really focused on proposals coming from inside the partnership. And I think we probably envision maybe other groups that may be completely outside of Research for Life may be coming forward with proposals, but probably at some later stage of development once our efforts are more mature. And then projects must be consistent with Research for Life mission. So that's the guiding principle here, that projects that get proposed and ultimately get funded, how do they align with the Research for Life mission? And it's really quite important to note that we need to raise money. We've put this organization together in the Friends for Research for Life, but it's a vehicle, and that vehicle actually needs to raise funds in order to fund proposals. So you could have a process where you come forward with a proposal and it's approved, but then it has to wait until funding is available. But again, that shouldn't stop you from putting proposals forward, because those proposals can also help us with our fundraising efforts, knowing that there are projects that we would like to fund, but we need for want of funding. So that we actually can work off that and use that. So next slide, please. So here's the project proposal workflow. And I know it's a busy slide, but let me just lay out here the key players. So there is, in the upper right corner, it's the Executive Council Executive Group. So that's the chair, vice chair, past chair of the Research for Life EXCO group. They are really sort of the coordinating, they kind of coordinate moving proposals around in this workflow. Another key group in this is the Fundraising Subcommittee, or it's not subcommittee, I'm sorry, I'm using old wordage, the fundraising team. Another key group is the committees. And this, on this chart, it says subcommittees, but the teams or committees that make up Research for Life, because we see those groups either putting forward proposals or vetting proposals that come to them. So CapDev, comms, technology, they're going to be the key groups that are going to be looking at proposals and helping us to evaluate them and asking questions and improving them. There's also listed here right below the subcommittee evaluates proposal is consult with the finance oversight team. Again, another one of our teams that plays a key role here as we're talking about budget implications. So that's all on the sort of the upper right corner. If you move to the left side, you will see on the second row, EXCO reviews proposals, recommends, and assigns strategic priority. So it's another key group is the Executive Council. They are going to be the ones who receive a proposal that's gone through, been looked at by the various Research for Life groups and teams. They're going to be the ones looking at that and sort of making a determination about the proposal and its strategic importance. Like, how does this align with the Research for Life mission and its priorities? And then from there, depending on that conversation, it will go to the Friends of Research for Life board. And the board of directors for the Friends group will review proposals and make a determination of funding or not to fund the proposal. And again, approved proposals cannot be implemented unless there's available funding. So that's just keep that in mind. And then you see there's a lot of yes and no's here, but the important thing about this is an iterative process. It's a dialogue. So as you come forward with proposals, there's going to be opportunity for conversation, questions, maybe revisions along the way. But the idea is to help us put together a really strong proposal and have a transparent process by which things are reviewed and then go to the board, the Friends of Research for Life board. The board can also propose their own projects because they're an independent organization. They can propose their own projects, in which case they would go to the Executive Council, to EXCO, for their review. Just because the board wants to fund something or provide funding, they don't just get to do that. There is a conversation that has to happen and agreement on between Friends and the board and EXCO in Research for Life. All right. I'm going to hand this off now to Andrea.
Thanks very much, Daniel. And hopefully the picture is now becoming clearer in terms of the process, what happens, particularly when a committee, a team gets together and decides that they want to submit a project for funding. And what you have on the screen in front of you is one of the documents that is now available through the Friends of Research for Life website, and the link will be shown in the slides later on. But this is really to show you how we've tried to keep the proposal development process reasonably simple, straightforward, and not overly bureaucratic. And it is important that we have an audit trail for all of the projects, particularly where third-party funding is involved. But it's obviously good governance, good practice to ensure that we're able to trace the sources of funds and the application of those funds from start to finish. So we've developed a very simple project proposal template. And what you can see here is the different elements of that proposal form. So the first thing, obviously, is that the project would need a name, a title, and then clear definition of who is submitting the proposal. And as we've seen from the previous slide, proposals can come from anywhere, but we anticipate that certainly in the first little while, those proposals will come from internal committees and groups within the Research for Life partnership. So then we're looking for a bit of background information, and particularly what the link is to the to Research for Life's strategic priorities. The strategic plan, the current strategic plan, is on the Research for Life website. I think most people are pretty familiar with what the strategic priorities are, but we can you can always refer back to that document. And as we move now into our next strategic planning phase, there'll be a new strategic plan that will replace the current one. So we're looking here for the link to the core priorities of the programme. Then the project description and the project management plan. This can be free form. We're not looking for any specific format here for a project management plan, just some definition, some explanation of how the project will be monitored and implemented. Then what the deliverables will be from the project. So what outputs are we looking for? Are you aiming to achieve? The timeline. And what we have got is a link here to a template for a structure for the presentation of a timeline. Essentially, it's a very simple spreadsheet. Then we're looking for some comments on impact. Then as we move on to the next page, we're looking at the overview of a budget. And again, we can show you in a moment, we have a sample, sort of an anonymized budget template that you can use. It's there as a guideline, and some of the elements that are in our anonymized template may not be appropriate for the project that you're proposing, but it gives you an idea of the kind of elements that we'd be looking for. So a breakdown, for example, between staff costs, so personnel costs, and direct expenditure. And then finally, and importantly, some explanation is needed of how the project will be monitored in terms of the reports that will be provided back to the Friends of Research for Life board. Again, no proscription here, no sort of insistence on a particular format or number of reports. What seems appropriate for this particular project? If it's a simple project, maybe just one report is needed. If it's a complex project, maybe more than one. So as an example, for the content portal development project, we were looking for one report at the point of the development of the launch of the beta site for testing, and then a final report within 3 months of the go live date for the content portal. So that was what was proposed and agreed by the board. So just to recap really on the reporting, we are looking for regular status reports. As I say, this is very much in order to maintain the audit trail and to maintain our transparency, which is so important in the context of the establishment of the 501c3. And once the project is completed, those final reports go back to the board of Friends of Research for Life for sign off. So just again, to repeat there, that the proposal form that we've just read through should describe what that reporting process will be and the time frame on which the reports will be submitted, but that they should be sensible and commensurate with the scale of the actual project itself. So now we move on to how the funds that are raised through Friends of Research for Life flow through our processes, flow from one entity to another, and then appear in the chart of accounts that we sign off on. We sign off every year at the General Partners meeting. But just a bit of background for those who haven't really been exposed to this aspect of Research for Life before. What happens on a normal annual basis is that the finance oversight team recommends an annual expenditure budget to the GPM for approval. And it's based on a discussion with each of the individual committees and proposals received from them. And of course, it's based on how much money we have available. And those of you who have been to GPM meetings and have heard the presentations will know that it's always a difficult balancing act to determine how much we should be spending in each area of activity compared to how much money we have available to us, and how much we need to retain in our reserves to cover difficult years like last year when we saw a fall off in the Group B fee income due to COVID. And in recent years, the last couple of years in particular, our annual expenditure has been quite significantly in excess of our annual income. And that's really been because we've been living through a period of investment. We've been catching up on some projects that have been long overdue. And we made the decision that it was important to see those projects and investments through in order to keep Research for Life relevant and useful and achieving the impact that it has done for the last 20 years. So we've been investing in new content portal, we've been investing in our reviews, and so we've accumulated some deficits, but we're okay. We've been covering those through the accumulated reserves that we've built up over the last few years. And apart from these major areas of investment, our expenditure has actually been very modest. And one of our challenges is that we know, one of our frustrations, if you like, is that we know we could do so much more if we were able to spend more money, if we had more money available to us to do more outreach, to do more publicity, to do more training. And so I mentioned we do have a reserve fund, but if we only continue to rely on our Group B fees and continue to see the kind of investment we need, that money isn't going to last forever. And so it's so important that we've now got the Friends of Research for Life organisation in place. What happens when a donor says they want to give us some money is that they are invoiced, and the monies that they offer are paid directly to Friends of Research for Life. And as Daniel mentioned, the 501c3 has been set up with its own very separate board of directors, separate bank accounts, separate legal status. So the money goes straight to the Friends of Research for Life bank account, and is held until it is allocated to an approved project. So when a proposal is approved, those funds are then ring-fenced and allocated within the overall budget, and we then start to discuss the process for transferring the funds to the procuring organisation. Because as we all know, Research for Life is not a legal organisation, does not have its own bank accounts. Procurement of services has to be handled by one of the parties, one of the partners. That might be the STM Association, might be one of the UN agencies. So we then have a discussion to agree which of those partners is going to procure the services. In the case of the content portal project, it was STM that was the procuring partner. And so the funds from Research for Life had to be transferred to STM in order to be able to pay the invoices received from Ingenta. So when those sums are then paid, when the invoices are paid, we can then reflect that expenditure in the Research for Life annual accounts, because until the money is actually spent, it's held on the balance sheet and therefore doesn't appear in the annual statement of income and expenditure. So this budget that you see on the screen now is essentially a cut and paste, a lift from the presentation that was given to the GPM earlier this year that reflects this process that I've just described. This is not the Friends of Research for Life accounts. These are the Research for Life annual statement of income and expenditure. And the middle column here you see is the forecast income and expenditure for the calendar year of 2021. If I talk you through it from top to bottom, we base our income on the number of paying institutions and the number of the amount of actual received subscription fees for any given year. You may not be surprised to hear that Group B's fees are paid sometimes erratically, sometimes for multiple years all at once, sometimes in arrears, sometimes well in advance, and sometimes occasionally in the year in which they are actually due. So we have to go through an accrual process to ensure that we allocate the right amount of subscription income to the right calendar year. And our forecast for this year is that we think we'll get somewhere over $200,000 in Group B fee income. And then we record any other income that we might be seeing. And in this year, we have received, we are spending the last tranche of funds that we received quite some time ago now from Springer Nature towards technology upgrades for the platform. And now that we've completed a lot of the work on the top technology upgrade, or the latest bit of technology upgrade, we can then expense that final tranche. We are also forecasting that we will, in this year, spend $200,000 of externally raised funds, so funds raised through Friends of Research for Life. $125,000 of that relates to the content portal redevelopment. $25,000 of that relates to the project to develop a fundraising strategy, but the final $50,000 is yet to be secured. So this is still a forecast. And we're obviously hoping that our combined efforts will ensure that we receive further revenue and that we're able to spend that revenue during the rest of 2021. So we see a total picture of income for this year of somewhere around about $450,000 US dollars. And then on the second half, the bottom half of the chart, you can see how that money is spent on evaluations. The next line shows the 50,000 of as yet unallocated expenditure on Friends of Research for Life projects. So essentially, if we don't receive the 50,000 in, we don't spend the 50,000 out either. So it nets off to zero. But this is reflecting that we're expecting some further expenditure to be incurred. Then we have our communications budget, our fundraising costs, our technology costs, and capacity development costs, and then other expenses. Mainly this year will relate to the strategic retreat that's taking place later in the year. So you can see how the revenue that is raised by Friends of Research for Life remains with Friends of Research for Life until it is approved for expenditure, and then it appears in this chart here. So as we go forward, as we go from GPM to GPM, you'll start to get more familiar with the way that those funds from Research for Life are transparently accounted for. And it also explains why sometimes there's a mismatch between when the money is received by Friends of Research for Life itself and when it is transferred across for spending by the core Research for Life team. Just to finish off this slide on the far right, you can see what we're proposing for 2022, what we're forecasting or budgeting for 2022, which is a small, modest increase, fingers crossed, from our Group B fee income, and a further 200,000 from Friends of Research for Life towards projects. But because we don't yet know what those projects will be in 2022, you can see further down the screen that the Friends of Research for Life projects to be allocated is the full $200,000. Now, if we end up spending the $200,000 on existing business, so let's say, for example, on technology, some of that cost may appear against the technology line further down the chart, or it might appear against capacity development. And we might improve the financial position by actually just using Friends of Research for Life generated income to cover some of our anticipated expenditure. But one thing to point out is that the bottom right-hand corner of the spreadsheet is still showing a negative. So there's still a deficit in our anticipated annual expenditure, but it's getting much closer to zero. We're getting much closer to a balanced budget, thanks to the income that we anticipate coming in through fundraising. I'll move on, but we'll obviously have time to come back, and you can ask any questions you might have about the way that the way we account for fundraising within Research for Life. So just to repeat, we have an area on the Friends of Research for Life website where the proposals are available, the proposal template, and all the other supporting documents, and we're always ready to help provide support and talk you through and help you with the development of a proposal. I'm going to pause for a moment. What we can do then is come back to have a look at a completed template, completed proposal form, if people would find that useful. Suspect they will. So what I'm just going to do is just stop sharing for a moment and bring Daniel back online if you want to unmute down, so we're both available, and just see at this stage if people have any comments, questions, was anything unclear. The floor is open. Please just, it's a small group, we all know each other, so if you want to speak, just take yourselves off mute and pitch in.
Yep. Yeah, you can raise your hands or put things into chat, and I see in chat the link to all the documents that have been put in, and as I said, everyone who's registered for today's webinar will also send you the slides as well. So we'll also send out the recording, but you'll also be able to see the slides.
We've obviously done a fantastic job, Daniel, of explaining the process. Either that or they're so overwhelmed by the detail involved. Hopefully that's not sounding like too daunting a task. So I want to show you in a moment an actual work through proposal to show you that it really isn't a burdensome exercise. We have really tried to keep the administration, the bureaucracy light, while maintaining the kind of structure and transparency and audit trail that we've mentioned. Okay.
Thank you, Roxalana.
Thank you. Anything else in chat? Any
Kimberly.
hands? Kimberly.
Kimberly.
Yeah, just not so much a question, but just to share that I'm in the midst of going through this experience myself, having just put in a proposal to the Friends of Research for Life. I'm just, the proposal is light, but if you're suggesting a somewhat complicated and expensive project, do expect that you're going to have people coming back and asking you for additional details. So the initial hurdle is low, and that's great. And then if you know you're actually proposing a major type of a project, then just be aware that you're going to have to flesh it out, whether for the Friends of Research for Life or potentially for a funder that they're going to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kimberly. And also too, that the template structure is designed, like as you're filling it out, you're also you're at least starting to answer those questions. And so, that helps the process along, right? But yes, there will be questions along the way, particularly for a larger project, I'm sure, but maybe even small ones. But again, it's all toward a good cause of making sure we understand the proposal and that it can be positioned as well in the best possible light for consideration by EXCO and then the board.
Okay, well, let me just bring up then the
Oh, Lenny, do you have a question?
Oh, Lenny, go ahead.
Yes, I do. That there may be times that the group that is supposed to review something is proposing. And the people that have the expertise about whether this is valuable or not will be the ones submitting it. So you may need to have a workaround with that.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, a great comment. I would say that one of the things that helps us here is that say CapDev is coming up with a proposal. It's emanating out of your group. Yes, you are the folks who are the most engaged in that work. You come forward with a proposal, but it still has to go to EXCO. So you have a wider group of people who are going to be looking at it and thinking about the proposal. And then it's also, then we'll go to the board. So there are going to be other eyes, other perspectives that will come into play into that review.
And I think it's worth repeating that this is we've only just launched Friends of Research for Life, so we're in the very early stages of developing this process. And I think we've put a lot of effort to get to where we are today, but none of us think that this is the end of the story. Sure. I think as we get more experience with developing proposals and working with donors as well, because I think a point was made very early in the discussions a few months ago that many donors want to help to shape the proposal as well, so they don't necessarily just want to be presented with a fait accompli. I see Sushanta nodding, and he has a lot of experience of this kind of activity. And I think once we've identified our target donor stakeholder groups, I'm sure that we'll find that they will want to work with us on the development of proposals, or some will and some won't. So I think we'll probably have to end up with a bit of a hybrid situation.
I'm sure there are ways to work around this, but it was just that, I mean, with such a small group, we'll have these kinds of overlaps, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me just quickly run through what we have here is a sample. It's been some of the sort of the detail or the numbers have been taken out just to make it a bit more generic. This particular project was for the content portal redevelopment, and what we see here, the first section on the background, why was this project important? What was the key issue that it was going to address? This was about the fact that we hadn't had an upgrade for a long time. It wasn't optimized, the current platform, etc., etc. Then we had a project description. You can see not pages and pages and pages, just a brief description of what the project would achieve, what the deliverables of the project would be. And you can see again, this is a bulleted list. Now, obviously, if further information was required, we had all this information within the project team, but this was enough to go through that approval process with the Friends board. Then the implementation timeline, which I can show you separately because that was an appendix. What the impact would be, and the budget overview and how it was going to be handled. And then finally, what the reporting agreements, what the reporting arrangements would be for this particular project. So this was a 2-page document pretty much with a couple of appendices. So for quite a large project in Research for Life terms, it was not an overly burdensome activity to put together that proposal. And what I'll show you here is the budget breakdown. There's some text here, some explanatory text, and then we have here a template showing the kind of information we would expect to see in a project budget, from what the human resource input would be, what kind of travel and accommodation costs there might be, logistics, facilities, supplies, and so on. So you can see here how that all would add up, and how it would be calculated, so that we can see how the budget breaks down. Okay. I think that's, unless there are any other questions. All of this information, I say, is available on the website using that URL that Domiziana posted into the chat. We've reached the end of what we were planning to cover this afternoon. Daniel, any final comments?
No, it's just that, this is, as we've said, this is a work in progress, but we're trying to build a really strong foundation for something that we are looking forward and expecting to grow and prosper in the coming years. Kimberly.
This is now with my fundraising committee hat on. I'm just curious as to how many of the Research for Life members on the call expect that they're going to be putting in a proposal, whether this year or maybe in 2 or 5 years.
Lenny's got his hand up.
Lenny has his hand up. Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to do a thumbs up. There's a thumbs up.
Susanna as well.
Thank you, Susanna.
Oh, and Gratian. They're all coming in now. I think one of the things that may stimulate further proposals will be, first of all, we have a fundraising workshop, a strategy workshop coming up later this month that Sushanta is organising with a number of members of the fundraising committee and the board of Friends of Research for Life, and a few others, I think, program managers as well, so that we can really start to think about who we can target for fundraising, and then it becomes a kind of iterative process to say, well, what sort of projects do we think they would be interested in funding? What's the ask? What's the story that we're going to sell to those donors? And then, therefore, what kind of projects would we develop to support that fundraising? So I think as we develop our fundraising strategy, and as we become more sort of sophisticated, if you like, in identifying sources of funds and matching funds to projects, I think this process will become more familiar and more regular. And then, of course, we move into the final stage of the year, which and we will be going through our strategic planning process for the next 5 years of Research for Life's existence. And of course, the fundraising strategy is a key component of that. So hopefully we've got all our ducks in a row and a few worked examples to show how it all works in practice. And we can all look forward to some exciting times ahead. Okay, well, I think we're done. We've got some thumbs up, some claps. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for your time today. This has been it's been a real pleasure being able to pull this together, because it also helps us as we're trying to build this, is to be able to actually present it and walk things through. So thank you all. And yes, definitely thanks to Domiziana and the comms team for helping getting this together for us and getting the documents up for later access.
A question has just come in from Roxalana. No, Group B fees are collected by WHO. So they're held completely separately from Friends of Research for Life funds.
Yep. Great question.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. well, we can release you to get on with the rest of your day. And we look forward to receiving all those proposals.
And be in touch if you have questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.